So we are in this series called Living Hope, where we are going through the book of 1 Peter. And the first thing that comes to mind when you hear the word living hope is, well, what is that? What does it actually mean? Because the thing that comes to mind for me is optimism. Like, I'm just going to put on a brave face. I know that down the line, Jesus has the final word, but right now, like, how am I supposed to conduct myself? So what's the difference between optimism that's not rooted in something and hope that is rooted in something?
Well, hope, I think it's a word that is obviously has a lot of meanings, and people have used it a lot of different ways. And we hope for all sorts of things. I hope that the Yankees will win the World Series this year.
Right.
I don't know that they will, but it's an uncertain outcome. That's kind of what we call hope very often is, we hope the weather will get better. We hope we'll get a promotion. We hope this year will be better than last year, whatever it is. And all of those things that we hope for are rooted in uncertainty. And the difference in 1 Peter and living hope, it's one of those Christian phrases that
Right.
if you've been a Christian for a long time, you just kind of check off on. And
You
sounds
hear it,
good.
you sing it, you see it. It's like, okay, that's very Christianese to some degree.
Yeah. But the thing that we see in the letter that 1 Peter is writing is that this hope actually isn't tied to an uncertain outcome. It's tied to a certain outcome. It's tied to that these people have gone all in on who Jesus is and who gets the final word and what the final outcome is in their lives. So regardless, in the book or in the letter, it talks a lot about persecution because that's what those people were experiencing is actual real problems.
Yeah.
And Peter doesn't kind of try to pray those away. He doesn't try to just offer platitudes. He says, yeah, you're going through this stuff and it's tough. And it's brought you to a breaking point, but your hope isn't here. Your hope isn't in your circumstances. Your hope isn't that those things somehow will get better. Your hope is in Christ. It's anchored somewhere, and it's anchored in the gift that you've been given in salvation now, but the certainty of where that leads you at the end of your lives, at the end of things, whether that's tomorrow or whether that's years from now. It's anchored in a certain thing, and that is the difference. That's the difference between a living hope and an uncertain hope.
And the thing that comes to mind with that is that, yes, the outcome is certain. If I'm not functioning with that level of certainty, do I actually believe it? I think that's what many people actually struggle with when they come to this idea of hope, that it's not just wishful thinking because I know the outcome, but do I know the outcome? Am I sure of that? I think there's a level of doubt that comes within that.
Of course. And I think we have to be careful with this because condemnation can seep in.
Yeah.
Because I think we've all run into people who they just project this air of certainty, whether they have it or not. This is faith. This is, the writer of Hebrews says, faith is the hope in is the thing that we want, the conviction of the thing we haven't seen yet.
Yeah.
And Peter talks about that a little bit as well. He says, you haven't seen this yet. You don't see it now. He actually says that in chapter 1. You don't see Jesus like in person in the return now, but we look forward to this thing in the future. That is the definition of faith. And anytime there's faith, and this is something I think we really undersell a lot in Christianity, there are times where we struggle with it. Like I've had seasons of doubt. I've had seasons where I'm like, is this really all it's cracked up to be? Is this really true?
It's never the selling point, right? Like when we say, oh, give your life to Jesus, nobody says, and by the way, you're going to struggle with this. And there's going to be times where you're not sure. And you're going to wonder at times if this is real. We never sell it like that because if it was a product, we'd say, nobody's going to buy this. But the problem is this isn't a product. This is a process. This is a spiritual development process that really requires something from you. And I think there's something to that. You talked about that in the last message, that this costs you something.
Yes.
That's what's hard.
It requires us to embrace a way of living which is utterly counter to the way that we've been taught by the world around us. And I was talking a little about doubt. I wanted to kind of finish that idea because doubt leads you somewhere. It leads you one of a couple places. The analogy I've used before is it's like when you get to one of those Y intersections in the road. You can't stop and just sit there. You've got to go somewhere. You've got to either go towards cynicism or you have to choose to go towards hope. And I mean that when you're choosing, you're saying, I'm going to live as though these things are true. And in the case of Jesus, we have faith. We believe that they are. We believe that he is who he said he is. But there is that element of faith, and that's absolutely counter. At least on the surface, it's counter to what the world around us says. What's interesting, though, is when you get under the surface, all the things that people put their hope in are actually all faith-based. There's the hope, like, if I make more money, I'm going to finally be fully satisfied.
That's hope.
If I get the thing, if I go the place, if I have the relationship, it's actually all of those things are belief systems that function very much like religions at their utmost. And I don't think anyone would call it that. And it's not that it's bad to want those things.
Sure, but it's a guiding principle of which you base your life on.
Yes. And that's a belief system.
Right.
And that all of those belief systems always have a measure of faith involved. Or they have this measure of kind of just unthinking obedience, where you don't really probe too deeply. You just kind of do what your neighbors do and do what those other people did and do what your parents did and, aspire to the same things as everyone around you. And it's something we all fall into. But I think it's why, in the church and the community of faith, it's so important for us to put this on the surface all the time.
Yeah.
Because it's something that we can then begin to follow when we do it together.
Yeah, and it's tough because going back to that idea of a belief system, it's easier to put my faith, my hope, my trust in making more money or if these circumstances change, then this will happen because I can see it.
Yep.
Because I can control it to some degree. I think, well, if I work hard enough, if I just do, if I hustle, I'm going to get. And now I can manipulate the circumstances. Therefore, now my hope isn't actually in something else. It's actually in myself.
Yeah, and it's there's this real struggle, and our culture feeds it to us in a million different ways, of instant gratification. If I can do the thing, I can get it now. I can get what I want now. I can be who I should be now. I can get what I deserve now.
Yeah,
and that goes on and off. And I think we kind of instinctively know that all the good things in our lives are when we delay the gratification. They're the best things. I remember this one time. There's this concept, like, I don't think we do it much anymore, and it's actually because credit cards are so they're so prevalent now, where you can just you can get the thing you want now and pay it off later. So you put the costs down the road and you get the gratification now. Delayed gratification is you pay the cost now, you get the payoff later.
Exactly.
I remember this one time, it was like 20 years ago, I bought a drum set and I put it on layaway. Are you old enough to remember what layaway is?
I have a vague idea of the concept, but I've never experienced it.
I'll explain it to you right now. Layaway is kind of the reverse of a credit card. It's when you purchase something, but they lay it away. They put it in the back or whatever. You make payments on it until you pay the full amount, and then you get to take the thing home. So it's kind of the reverse of that.
So you did that with a drum set?
I did that with a drum set.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and it was, but the I mean, it's a silly thing, but the expectation it builds when you do that changes how you see things.
Totally.
Because and Peter talks about this. He says, we're looking forward to this thing. We're looking forward. We don't see it yet. We're making payments on it now without getting the payoff, without getting the gratification. But when we look forward, it actually changes how we live. It changes how we go through all of life. And I think the thing we bump up against in faith as Christians, especially as American Christians very often, is that we're so used to this instant gratification mindset everywhere else.
It's Amazon spirituality.
Yeah. It's like, we never, like, you used to have to go somewhere and get a thing, or you'd have to order it and wait a week or whatever. Now you can get it like I ordered something last night and it was outside my back door when I walked out at 6 this morning.
That's fascinating.
And we're just so used to that. Yeah. And this is so counter to that. And the temptation, I think, very often for the church, for people like me, people like you, is to try to offer a version of it.
And what came to mind is, I'm going to botch this, but I'm going to keep it in anyway, because I'm not that spiritual.
Yes, you are.
Isn't there a verse in the New Testament where the writer says, "For I'm convinced these present sufferings have no there's no weight compared to the glory
Future
that's
glory.
coming."
Yes.
Yeah. I don't live like that. I don't live with that mentality. I don't live that I'm working towards something. I'm paying something off. There's a layaway aspect. I don't live that way. And that changes everything about how I see the world, how I see my enemies, how I see my community, how I see my kids. It shapes everything when I don't live with that layaway mentality.
Yeah. We actually, I think, we Christians, we can say the thing about salvation and, we have, eternity with God and heaven, however we want to say it.
And it's all true.
It is all true, but we don't actually live as though it's true.
Right.
It's kind of, it's one of my pet peeves about how we encounter the scriptures sometimes, is that it's this moral lesson that we're learning. That we can read this and we can come up with some, moral, Jesus was a great teacher, and he was.
Yeah.
But you miss the point of everything he said if you're not looking at it with this much longer perspective, that we're actually made for another world. We're made for eternity. When we bump into these things, I think it was C.S. Lewis who said this, when we bump into these desires that nothing can satisfy, the promotion won't, the bigger house won't, the relationship won't, whatever it is won't, the self-improvement won't.
Yeah.
We've bumped into the thing that shows how we were made and why we were made and what we were made for.
And that's a good thing, that, at least there's some mechanism in life that highlights there's a desire underneath this. Where the problem is if we stop at the desire.
Yep.
That's the issue.
Or if we try to fill the desire with all the different versions of until we kind of run. I think really the tragedy of this is most people don't figure this out. It's going to sound like kind of dark, but most people don't figure it out until it's too late. They don't figure it out until they've tried all the things, and then they've tried different versions of the things, and they've moved somewhere else and tried another thing, or they've ended the one relationship and started the next one and tried that. And they get to the point in their lives where they bump into the fact that none of those things finally and fully satisfy.
Yeah.
And then it's too late. They've lived most of their lives, and they're face to face with their mortality. And it's really too late to go back and live in such a way that actually has an impact in the world. And that's the thing that Peter talks about so often. He's like, not only do you have this reality with God, but it impacts how you live, how you love, how you see other people, how you serve other people, what you do with them. It trickles down into those other places.
Yeah.